changes, they really cloister him and start training him, and he doesn't interact anymore. And that's why I think he's such a innocent, which kind of bothers some people, but I just can kind of see it. They didn't let him interact with the rest of the colony, then he's going to have this very much more innocent,
sheltered kind of life. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And yeah, that seems how it is. Like they let him, she trained him, but she didn't really socialize him.
Right.
So it's like if you have a kid and you never let them out of the house, like, and I don't mean just like for school, but like if you give them homeschooling plus home baseball lessons, and then they can only play video games, not online, like they would have no social skills.
And if you've ever been at a convent, I went to Catholic high school, and there was a convent attached to it, and there is this society. I mean, they have their own world that they are part of. So if you grew up in that, you just would have a whole different viewpoint and a whole different demeanor. So,
right. And he's still very young.
He is very young.
I would assume that usually these Quatmalats don't, and they're usually women, not men, so that changes things. But even still, I would assume they don't go on their missions till they're significantly older.
Right. I'm sure there's levels and apprenticeships, and then.
Right. He seems like, she said he finished it last, whatever. She gave a month, but less than a year ago, basically, he finished his training.
Yeah, I feel like this is his first definite full-fledged mission.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree.
But I think that it's really hard to come out of a self-isolation, and especially such a long one. So I feel like that's a little bit of what we're seeing here with the Raffi-Picard relationship. We had a little bit of a reach out last episode in the study, when she's like, or not in the study, on the transporter pad, when she said almost like old times. But then with the crash she experiences with her son, that just kind of all goes out the window, and she's back at day one.
Yeah, the son scene, him not wanting anything to do with her. If you're an addict, it's definitely going to send you back into being an addict.
And she wasn't all that far out of it anyhow. She told him that she was, but she really wasn't. It's not like she'd been on the path for a year.
Right. She was drinking in the episode she met Picard. He brought his wine, so it's not like she'd been recovered for a long period of time. But so I see your point there.
I do feel like everyone is treating her kindly. They're not judging her. They know they have to wait for her to come to them, and you don't feel like there's any kind of. I do think you even see a little bit of sadness with Picard when she does come on the bridge. There's a cut to him, and she's sitting down, and she takes that hit on the vape pen, and there's just a little. I mean, you can kind of see that does bother him, but he's not going to judge or say anything, or, just like Rios. He's just, I'm just going to be here for you. Picard just doesn't go that far. So I'm just going to be here for you.
Right. No, he's not going to be personable about it. And Rios is. Speaking of Rios, what about his romance with Angie starting?
Well, I saw that coming from the very first time he hears her voice on the comlink when she's talking her way on board. He's stacking some stuff, and she starts talking, and he stops and kind of listens, and then kind of like half chuckles to himself. And you can tell he's engaged from that moment. And there have been at least like 2 or 3 scenes, including the hollow ads thing. There was something there all along. So I wasn't taken by surprise. I did feel it was reciprocal between both of them. So I really wasn't surprised. Was it smart? Who knows? But she definitely has an attraction to him. And the Maddox thing was 14 years ago. She is still bonded to Maddox. And of course, this whole situation happens. But that doesn't mean she's not attracted to him. That's a gone thing. That's a done deal. I liked that in that scene, he does stop and says, kind of like pumps the brakes and says, "What are you feeling now?" He asks her what she's feeling. And he asks her, why do you want to do this? And she's like, well, maybe I'll feel better for a few hours. This is probably a big mistake, but that's what I want right now. So I was expecting it at some point. I would have been surprised if that hadn't happened, to be honest.
It's interesting. I didn't necessarily expect it. It didn't necessarily surprise me either. But what I do think of when seeing that is, well, she just killed Maddox. So yeah. She obviously is not going to stay around forever, right? I mean,
no.
She's obviously some kind of spy. Oh, well, give me a second and then you can do your theory. But she's obviously some kind of spy. So her saying, well, it'll make me feel better for a few hours, she may only be thinking a few hours in the future anyway.
Right. Yeah.
At any given time, because at any given time they could figure this whole thing out.
I'm not certain she cares about that. I honestly think that if she gets to her, whatever her end goal is, which we all are not sure about, her guilt is such that I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if she just said, yep, I did it, or does something self-immolating, like, kills herself or sacrifices herself in some way. She's kind of past that point, and the performance is just amazing by Allison Pill. Just so much emotion just in her eyes and her face in these scenes.
Yeah, she's a great actress.
She's really good.
And that's a common among all of these people. They're great actors and actresses. 2 weeks ago, I had said it that Picard is absolutely on top of his game. I mean, Patrick Stewart is by far one of his best performances ever.
And I love with Patrick, I love these little glimpses we get of the old Picard. People keep saying, oh, he's not like the old Picard. But there are times when he's discussing something and you just see a glimmer. Especially when I was talking to Rios and he says, uh-huh. And it was just like such a flashback to TNG, the way he was speaking, and it was just microseconds. So I feel like Patrick really is playing at a higher level and letting that layer come through just in bits and spots. And I love that.
Yeah, I think it's great because I don't think he should be the same exact person as he was when we saw him last time. But
you still see it, you still see him,
right? In little bits and clips, but obviously, like you were saying before, if you put yourself in isolationism for 14 years, you would have to change. And even if you didn't put yourself in isolationism, you would have had to have changed. Everyone would change over 14 years to some degree. And him being in isolationism has forced more change than an average person would go through in that time.
Yeah.
So I think that's great.
Well, I really, I just thought that this episode picked up the pace, and you just saw it steadily increase throughout to the end game where they go through the portal. And I know my friend was like, why don't they all go through to Nepenthe? And I can't see Hugh leaving his position. He's not going to go with them because he's that's his leadership qualities. He is going to stick with his people, his XBs. He's not going to leave that cube voluntarily, at least not right now. So, that totally made sense. And I was really actually glad to see Elnor stay there to help protect him, because I was like, oh my God, poor Hugh is going to be super vulnerable when they get through. So it was kind of an extension of his mission with Picard to stay there, not just making sure they don't figure out where they went, but also kind of protecting Hugh.
Right. One goes hand in hand at this point, because if they get rid of Hugh, they'll find where Picard went. So Hugh can justify the bond with just staying to protect Hugh, because if you do one, it does the other.
Right. Exactly.
So,
yeah,
it was very interesting scene, and the fact that. So, do you think that every cube has one of these queen chambers in them, or do you think
that's the impression that I got, that there is a cell for if the queen is there, so that she has an egress? I've always been a little confused on the whole queen situation. I've never been a huge fan of the queen concept. Since the Borg is supposed to be a collective, I get why they've used it, but it's never been something that I super felt fit. But since it does exist, we still don't know if there's one queen or multiple. And but it makes sense to me. And you kind of saw a little bit of that with Janeway. She was in some kind of special clean room on that Borg ship.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
I'm assuming that they have that because she may go from ship to ship, if there is just one, or if there's one per quadrant or something. So it kind of makes sense that there's this secret cell. And I loved that whole thing with Hugh too. And he's like, and we just know this is here. But everything Hugh did was just great.
So that was awesome too. You're right. Because somehow Picard's like, oh, the Queen Room, or whatever he said. Queen Chambers, I think he calls
Queen
it.
Cell, I think is what they call it.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. And then he was like, yeah, you remember it. He goes, I was never here. He goes, me neither. Like, so it's just there. And of course it's just there because every one of the Borg drones knows whatever the Queen knows, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the Queen wants them to know, I guess.
It's just like all of those drones remember him. That was hilarious when they're finally going after Soji and they're in this hurry. And that one ex-Borg is like, well, Cutis?
Yes, yeah.
and he was like, please, not right now, please. And he keeps hustling him along. And I know that was like this tiny humorous moment, but it was so good.
It was perfectly placed too, because it was almost at the very end of the running scene.
Yeah.
So they kind of found her like a split second later, but you just kind of catch it in the background, which is what you're meant to do, like, oh wait, I think one of them recognized them. And but what leads into that scene is great so Narek gets Soji into the chamber, and apparently you can't see anything inside that chamber, which is the reason why he gives her his real name at that moment. He actually tells her his real name and says, I can be open here because I'm not, I can be vulnerable here, but it's because they're not vulnerable to the outside world. And he also knows she's going to die in his head at the end of this. So if I tell her, who cares? No one will ever know I told her. But it'll get her to trust me more.
Well, his sister is listening. She knows. And I feel like it was a little dig at her, too, because he has clearly been uncomfortable with her through this entire thing. And there's no love lost between them, that's for sure. This is the first episode I really felt that brother-sister relationship, though. For a long time, I was like, I'm not sure they're even really brother and sister. But this one, when he walks in and she's playing with that cube of his, and he's like, give that back, you're going to break it. The vibe in that scene was very sibling-like. I'm like, okay, I can tell these people did live together their whole lives.
Right.
But
it is interesting.
She knows that he told her his real name.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but I think you're right. That is a dig at the sister because they have this weird, like, Cruel Intentions vibe going where they're in a relationship. I
feel like, pretty much from the beginning, except for the very first scene, which I still feel like that was a little bit of manipulation. From that time on, she has acted that way towards him, and he's always smacking her away. He's always hitting her hand away. He's always shoving her away. And that's even before he has, like, really a bond with Soji. So it does seem to be a lot one-sided.
It might be, but I think
that's why I feel like that was a little dig at her, too. It's like, you don't get this. She gets this.
Yeah, I mean, you may be right, but I just think that if you were to go back, and we can't go back past the show, we would find that it was more equal, the feelings there.
Well, possibly, yeah, at one point. I don't know.
And she's still holding on while he's now starting to move away because of Soji. He's moving away faster and faster. Because even when he walks her through the dream, she wakes up, he gets her to go back into the dream, and then he gets her to see herself on the table, look up, find the moons. Once they have the information, she says to him, now we know where her homeworld is. He says that to her, puts the cube down and walks out. You can see he's about to cry.
Well, he was, even when he told her she wasn't real, he was already starting to cry there, when that was starting to confuse her. And, it's like he was telling her that, but I think he was kind of trying to reinforce it for himself too. And it wasn't working very well. But I feel like that was also I'm in love with something that's not